Arnold Schoenberg's text, Fundamentals of Musical Composition, which was posthumously published in 1967, contains his first public definition of the sentence as a theme type. Drawing on the instrumental works of Beethoven, Haydn, and Mozart, Schoenberg describes the sentence as typically comprising an even number of measures, usually 8 or a multiple of 8. The normative model, he explains, consists of a two-measure basic idea, what Schoenberg calls a phrase, immediately repeated for two measures, either exact or varied, and followed by a four-measure continuation. Although only a few examples of Schoenberg's own music appear in the published version of Fundamentals, earlier drafts of the text include several more examples from his own compositions. For instance, in the second draft of Fundamentals, Schoenberg observes, "Among my own works, there are a number of themes whose construction is based on phrases of uneven length." He then analyzes passages from Verklärte Nacht and his first string quartet, Opus 7, using brackets and braces to demonstrate how these works exemplify phrase structures of uneven length. Schoenberg's analyses of his own works closely resemble his discussion of irregular and uneven sentence structures in the published version of Fundamentals. In Chapter 14, titled Uneven, Irregular, and Asymmetrical Construction, Schoenberg observes that, quote, sentences are more frequently composed of elements of differing lengths than periods, end quote. As an example, Schoenberg cites the overture to Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro. He observes that the opening sentence is made up of 5 units totaling 7 measures, 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 plus 2. Mozart's sentence begins with a one-measure basic idea, which Schoenberg shows with a bracket beneath measure 1. This is followed by a two-measure basic idea in measures 2 to 3. Because the two basic ideas differ in length, the resulting phrase forms an uneven 7-measure sentence rather than the expected 8. Schoenberg often acknowledged that Mozart's music was instructive for his own compositional practice. In a 1931 essay titled National Music, he stated that my teachers were primarily Bach and Mozart. From Mozart, I learned 1. Inequality of phrase length, and 3. Deviation from even number construction in the theme and its component parts. In a 1931 discussion broadcast on Radio Berlin, Schoenberg reflected on the use of uneven phrases in an aria from his oratorio Gurre-Lieder, and on how such irregularities render his music comparable to that of Mozart. And even the piece from Gurre-Lieder, Now I Tell You for the First Time. Quite unconsciously, here I wrote 5 5-measure phrases in a row. And you should not judge my earlier work by the elements that I did not develop further, but rather by the elements that give my style its direction. Not by the Tristan sound that is reminiscent of Wagner, but rather by the freedom of phrase lengths that is reminiscent of Mozart, because that is what becomes very characteristic for me. Later, while writing the chapter in Fundamentals devoted to uneven phrase constructions, Schoenberg prepared an analysis of his Gurre-Lieder to illustrate the 5-measure phrases. Unfortunately, this example from Gurre-Lieder and the examples from Verklärte Nacht and the String Quartet No. 1 mentioned earlier were omitted from later drafts of the book. But as unfortunate as this is, and as interesting as these examples are, perhaps the most intriguing analytical example from Schoenberg's own music found among the draft materials for fundamentals is Schoenberg's unpublished analysis of measures 1 to 8 from the first movement of his Fourth String Quartet, Opus 37. This quartet is often recognized as a prime example of his mature 12-tone technique. In the opening of this work's first movement, the first violin presents the principal 12-tone theme, which Schoenberg marked with an H and brace, the H designating the Hauptstimme, the German word for main voice. Schoenberg's analysis, notated on a single sheet of staff paper and handwritten in pencil, includes brackets, carets, and braces to highlight the motivic, rhythmic, and formal structures of the passage. Although the page itself does not contain an explanatory text, nor is it accompanied by a separate commentary, Schoenberg does provide a description of his annotations at the top of the sheet. These markings, written in blue pencil and black ink, indicate that braces denote phrases, carets identify rhythmic features, and brackets signify intervallic motifs. Whereas most analyses of this work concentrate on its 12-tone row forms and harmonic intervallic structures, Schoenberg focuses on the theme's formal design. His analysis suggests that he sought to relate the principal 12-tone theme to the traditional formal phrase type of the sentence. Rather than constructing a regular sentence consisting of an even number of measures, such as 8 or a multiple of 8, Schoenberg instead composed the theme as an uneven 5½ measure sentence. The braces indicate that the first phrase, the basic idea, spans 1½ measures, or 6 beats. The second phrase, a varied repetition of the basic idea, is shortened to a single measure, 4 beats. The final phrase, the continuation, extends for 3 measures, which includes the sustained B natural in measures 5 to 6. Although in fundamentals, Schoenberg defines the normative sentence as an 8-measure structure, many of the examples he discusses diverge from this model. To elucidate the concept of irregular phrase lengths in the music of Beethoven, Haydn, and Mozart, Schoenberg discusses how such phrases diverge from the normative 8-measure model and demonstrates how they may be normalized through the omission of phrase components. This analytical approach can also shed light on Schoenberg's 12-tone sentence from his Fourth String Quartet, turning his 5½ measure theme into a normative 6 or a 4-measure phrase. I arrived at a 6-measure sentence by borrowing the length of Schoenberg's opening 1½ measure basic idea for the repetition, creating the pattern 1½ plus 1½ plus 3. Notably, this recomposition of Schoenberg's theme as a 6-measure sentence reveals an emergent 3/2 meter. To create a 4-measure sentence, I shortened the first basic idea to 1 measure, producing the pattern 1 + 1 + 2. And now, Schoenberg's uneven 5½ measure sentence. The intended audience for Schoenberg's unpublished analysis of his Fourth String Quartet remains uncertain. Although it is found among the draft materials for fundamentals, the label Example 1 raises the possibility that he may have intended to include it in a set of program notes. Schoenberg did, in fact, write extensive notes for a performance of all 4 quartets by the Juilliard String Quartet. Regardless of its intended use, the example holds clear pedagogical value. Reconstructing the primary theme as 6 and 4 measure sentences according to the models in the published version of Fundamentals further illuminates how Schoenberg understood his own music as sustaining close ties to the tonal canon, particularly to Mozart. Toward the end of his life, Schoenberg continued to affirm the enduring significance of Mozart. In a 1949 interview at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, he explicitly acknowledged Mozart's influence on his own compositional approach.
I think that there is a possibility to learn something of my technical achievements. But I think it is even better to go back to those men from whom I learned them. I mean, to Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, and Bach. I can really contend that I owe very, very much to Mozart. And if one studies, for instance, the way in which I write for string quartet, then one cannot deny that I have learned this directly from Mozart. And I am proud of it.